Greetings. To make this slip-on sandal, I could use this pattern and have the whole upper part, one piece of leather, but I'm going to have a band across the instep, so I'm using the smaller body pattern. After I cut out this piece and the band, then I'll need to stitch the two pieces together. To cut out this piece, use a rotary cutter as often as I can, or I could use a gel marker and then cut it out with scissors. To cut out the band, I'll use this white gel pen and draw around it, and then I'll cut it out with my canary scissors. Since this is thick leather and I'm making it as a stitch-in, I need to thin the edges. So I'm using this tool called a skiver, and I put a fresh razor blade in, one of these, and I'm going to finish this little strip here and get it thin on the edge. And then the other edge. These blades get dull pretty fast. That's why it'd be so much better if you have knife skills. And then get these little tips. And then skive the band as well. And now I'm get on with stitching. So to punch stitching slits to attach the brown strip to the green one, I'm using my wing divider to make a line here and here. And I'll start with the main piece. I'm going to use my 4-prong slit maker here. If you don't have one of these, then these are 1/4 of an inch apart, so you can make a little mark every 1/4 of an inch and use your little screwdriver to make the slits. So I'll go along here, and then I'll do the same thing along the edge of the band. I will try to get those first slit marks lined up so that it'll be the same from one piece to the next. I'm also going to punch slits along the other edge of the band because I decided I want to kind of finish it off with some stitching both here and at the front edge. So I took 4 times the length of this seam and put a needle at each end, and then I'll even out the lengths, got that, and start doing the 2 needle running stitch down in the next, and then with my other end of the thread I come up. I'm holding this thread over to the side of the slit so that I don't poke my needle through the plies of the thread that's already in that hole. So I'm going to keep going like this until I get to the other end. Then I'll stitch the edge of the brown piece, then I'll stitch the two together. Now I'm stitching the band to the body of the upper. I'm just going to use one needle, and I made a knot in the end of it. And I'm finding that I like to treat knots now with Sally Hansen's nail polish. Once you have that knot, then I kind of soak it in the nail polish, and the knot doesn't come undone. So I can cut the one or two threads that come from it quite close. So I knotted the thread and then went through the stitch hole I made in the band. Then I'm going through the body and then back through the band. So I've got my first stitch here. And so this is making bars and a diagonal. I like this stitch. To me, it's a little more contemporary than a cross stitch. Or you can just make bars, which will be on the back side of this. You could just, like this bar here, you could just do bars and cross stitches on the inside. So whatever look you like. So you can see that's a diagonal stitch. And then I go through those same two holes again to secure them and make a bar. So one more time. I'm going diagonally into the two next slits and then making a bar through those same two slits. I'm trying to pull the thread that's already in the slit over to the side so that I don't puncture the plies that make up the thread. So I'll continue with this, and then I'll be ready to stitch the upper to the sole. If you're stitching along with this stitch and then something doesn't look quite right, turn it over. And there you will see, here's all the bars that are what would be expected, but here I was starting to go forward with a diagonal too soon. So check out the back side. And I didn't tell you how much thread to use. I recommend doing 8 times the length of the line that you're stitching. So especially for this bar and the diagonal, you don't want to run out of thread somewhere and have a knot where it might irritate your foot. I have all my edges stitched and I've pounded them with my hammer, and I'm ready to do this stitch in part. I decided to start over here so that I could use up some of my thread so that the thread I'm working with wouldn't be quite so long. I cut the thread 8 times the length of the sole, and now I've made it over to this area where I'm actually doing the stitch in. And the first side that you stitch is going to be very easy. I'm doing that same 2 needle running stitch. Each time I'm pulling that other thread over to the side, coming through, and giving a really good tug. I don't want these stitches loose. So now my third stitch here, I'm going in the next hole, and I'm bringing the other side up into that same hole, because I actually have holes in the sole and slits in the upper. So I'm holding this thread tautly over to the side, bringing this over and then into that same hole that the other thread came out of. pulling tightly. Okay, my next is here. I'm going down here, and then through the sole. And then up through that same hole and slit. And there's the one that I was stitching into. And a tug. Pretty strong tug. And the next slit. And the next hole. And then the thread that's on the bottom will go through that hole. Already has that thread in it, so I'm pulling it over to the side so I don't split it. So I'll stitch to the top edge, then stitch across. So I have one side of this shoe stitched in, and now I'll do the other side. And the other side is more challenging, but you can do it. So I have these few stitches of open toe, and then I take one of my needles through the underside of the upper, and then down in the next hole in the sole, and then my other thread comes up through that hole. So the same thing that we did on the other side. Now I'm going to go in that same hole in the upper. So I've made my two threads, one going across and down and the other across and up. I'm ready for my next stitch. So that will be in the next slit here. So I've come up in the next stitch and then down, and the other thread goes up through both of those layers, up through the sole, and up through the upper, and then the next stitch. So I've just pulled the thread through the next stitch and down through the sole, and then this stitch up, and I think it's time that I tighten these stitches. So I have these 3 stitches done. Now I'm going to tug, bring them all into place. So on to the next stitch, bring this thread down and the next one up. And then through the upper. Give a tug on it. It's looking good. And one more time, I'll take the inside thread, go up through the next slit, kind of poke it open from the other side. Then, got that, and down through the sole, and up through those two layers. You can do this stitch in with or any of the patterns that I have, but it's really important to have an opening at the heel seam, to not have the heel seam stitched. Then you can reach in and stitch everything in, and then your last thing to do is to stitch up the heel seam. And here's my final stitch in this band. The other thread goes up. And then through the band. And the sandal is finished, and this is how it looks. I'm really pleased with it, and I'll take this thread around this last corner a few times, tie a little knot with both ends, and then cut off the ends and put a little dab of nail polish on the knot and cut the ends in close. They'll be ready for me to wear them.